There we go. We're live. Train's rolling out, big boy. Brian Ray, alongside the one and only Mr. Ben Samuels. Mr. Samuels, how's it going today?
It's a fabulous Monday, Midland, Texas. We've got power. We've got sunshine. We might be out of the frozen apocalypse. Yeah, it's going well. Can't complain. What about you? What's going on?
Like, this is a record for power days. Like, remember the Office? It's like so many days of nonsense. They had to erase it or whatever. Or like, this many safety days. Like, y'all are like day 8 with power. 8 consecutive days with power.
But let me just throw it out there that when the power is working, it's good for the company. That in fact is good for the company.
Did you see they overbilled like $15 billion worth?
$16 billion worth, and the initial answer is sorry, we overcharged you, but you're not getting the money back. That's an interesting tactic. Let's see how that plays out. It's a bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because you've probably looked in this a little deeper than I have. Is it that there's the market price, and they're saying that they overbilled on that, right? They artificially held the price up. Okay. So how much does overtime cost, like all these expenditures are going in to get the power grid back up, play into that? Because I can see them saying, well, listen, the price is artificially inflated, but also we're spending an exorbitant amount of money to get this thing going again. I know from, you might say, well, I don't care about that one or another, but just generally speaking, is that going to be their defense?
Yeah, I think that is going to be the card that they're going to play. I mean, whether or not that holds water is, I think, a different conversation, because I think you're right. I mean, I think you explained it right, that the issue here is that they kept the prices inflated and massively inflated for, I think it was a little bit over 2 days. And yeah, you can make the argument that the reason that they kept that inflated, number one, was what if there had been another catastrophic downturn and they needed the cushion, or also that there's a massive need for infrastructure dollars and dollars, I should say, to kind of ramp the engine back up. Does that mitigate the lack of preparedness, and does that sort of, it seems as though the overages were sort of a backstop created because of the lack of preparedness and because of the lack of infrastructure necessary. And so, who foots that bill, right? And, it gets really complicated because Texas, obviously, we manage our power distribution differently than the entire rest of the country. We're an isolated market on purpose. Well,
Sorry.
Touche. I mean, touche. We have an agency that, in theory, is supposed to be looking over these things. Whether or not they ever do is a whole different conversation. But and this is not an answer to your question, but I mean, the thing that I keep coming back to, and I think you and I spoke about it either on the last podcast or a couple back, is this idea that this was a known issue, that the lack of winterization across the ERCOT system was known. It was quantifiable. There were reports done. There were studies done to see how much money it would take. Mm-hmm. You and I had this conversation, and it may have been off air, but you and I had this conversation about, I'm a firm believer that while I would like to think that the free market is apt to take care of those sort of things, I don't think there will ever be a scenario where you would have private industry voluntarily decide to choose to spend those dollars to sort of mitigate the risk of a future event. The other side of that coin, well, I mean, so time and time again, and we can talk about this. I mean, I know we were going to go in a different direction, but time and time again. Well, let me ask you this: if you could, if you've got an idea, a time in mind, when was there a time where an entire industry needed to spend preventative maintenance dollars and a substantive amount as an industry, and they chose to do that electively? Has that ever happened in the past in any private industry in history?
I mean, yes, I'm sure it has. So I will say yes. I cannot name it. So let me hold on, but real quick. Let me give you a little caveat here. The question that I've raised multiple times, and I'm not picking on you here. I'm saying, like, the question for me, the crux gets down to is, what is their liability? So if their liability becomes shielded by the government, and the government says they have no liability here, they gave you a 600-page terms and agreement service, and therefore they're not liable. Then it's hard to fault the private industry for using the governmental protection that they get, because the government's involved. It will be involved. This is not 100% of private industry.
But I don't think you get to make the argument that, hey, I'm for free enterprise, but as long as the government's my backstop, I'm going to use it. I mean, you're either for free enterprise or you're not. I mean, you're either for free.
I am.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the market. I mean, like the market player.
Agreed.
As the market player, you're either for it or you're not. You can't say, hey, I'm for it, but as long as I have this backstop, I'm going to use. Like, that doesn't work, right?
So my point is that the question that I think, and I don't have the answer, because I think it's kind of a complex question to so many people, is that when you talk about what is the responsibility of the power company to deliver power to my house, and what is, and I do understand that they cannot deliver it 24/7, 365. Tornadoes happen. Okay, so I understand that there's some kind of force of God nature clause in there that we have to, as humans, we have to understand that these things happen. Okay. That's not the same as saying that they did not prepare and they did not notify us that they were not going to prepare, and we did not have a chance to prepare. I'm talking about like 3 days before. So one of the things we talked about in the Textual Gas podcast this morning is, let's just say a generator costs $5,000 for your house, right? So and these storms happen, let's say, once every 10 years. Would you prefer every 10 to pay $40 a month extra on your electricity bill so they can winterize everything, or would you rather have the generator? Now, all things being equal, and this is, I'm simplifying this a lot, I would rather pay the power company $40 more a month to presume that I'm going to have this once in a lifetime, once every decade storm. I'll deal with it. Because the generator, I don't know how long they last. They last 10 years. I got to keep it up. I got to keep the dirt daubers. I don't want to deal with all that. I just prefer to pay them the money and go about my business. But that also means 10 years from now, if this thing goes black, lawsuit is coming. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Lawsuit is coming. So you get to this is the crux of the complexity, because you have people in apartment complexes who can't make this decision for themselves. You get into these things, and they become very, very entangled. But at the heart of the matter, to me, goes back to, what is their responsibility, and when can they declare act of God, and that's act of God versus not being prepared.
I don't think it even gets that nuanced in the sense that, what you're talking about sort of cavalierly just now is, exponentially increasing the power bill to people that probably can't pay it and can't afford it. I mean, there's a large swath of this of our state that can't afford the current power bill, and so why would you think that they would be able to spend an additional $40 per month in this sort of hedge on a bet of a future disaster hedge or safety? So I'm not advocating this as a pass through. What I'm saying is that let's pick one, that the Pulse Power company needs to pay their requisite share of the winterization of the ERCOT system, because they provide power to Texans. I'm not saying that Pulse Power should increase their requisite billing to their customers to pay for the offset. Like, they should have to pay for it. And if the private industry doesn't pay for it, it's just a tax. I mean, whether Pulse Power increases your bill $40 or the federal government increases your tax at like an infinitesimal percentage point to pay for it, it's the same exact thing. And so that's another thing that I struggle with in this sort of free market dynamic. If a company has an expense and their answer is, okay, cool, we have this expense, we're just going to pass it on to the customer so we don't have to touch this bill. Isn't that the exact same thing as taxation from the government?
Well, the difference is, so there is a difference. And the difference would be, and let's take the power for half a second here. Let's say that, the price of wrappers at the burger joint went up, 10x. And so McDonald's says, well, I'm going to pass that on to my customer. And so instead of having a $1 menu, I have a $1.10 menu. And Burger King, because they're a great establishment, says, we're going to eat that cost. You now can choose Burger King or McDonald's. So the extra 10 cents at McDonald's, extra or at Burger King. And when you talk about the tax model is not optional. There's no option there. So the market gives you options for people who pass the cost on to the customer. Everyone can choose how they want to divvy up this cost.
Okay. So using the apples to apples comparison, ERCOT says, as a resident of Texas, you now owe this tax. It's the exact same thing, right? I mean, just because another entity is saying, hey, you owe us more money, doesn't mean it's not a tax. Doesn't mean it's not the exact same lever being pulled. And so just because like the private industry decides, hey, this is the dollar amount we're going to tack onto your bill. I mean, look at your energy bill. Your energy bill isn't just energy, right? I mean, there's all those other subcharges. All those other subcharges. What if there was another subcharge that just said winterization? It was $40 a month.
That's how it is in Louisiana. Like I think I said last time when we left 2016, I think we were still paying the Katrina bill. You know, and so maybe it was gone by then. I don't know, but you know, so we were paying the Katrina tax from 2003.
But I think that's different, right? Because that is a sort of a tax on, like, that's a tax burden based on real damages of fiscal damage that happened, like a bill that has to be paid. We're talking about preventative maintenance, so we're talking about the other way.
Yeah.
So like what you're saying is this wouldn't have happened if New Orleans started charging their customers some money in 1990 and had winterized their system or changed their system.
All I'm saying is that when these things happen, what you have is ERCOT and the government talking about how we're going to solve this problem. Me and you, we get stuck with the result because the market is not actually liable. If you go to McDonald's and they serve you cyanide poisoning, you know, your family could sue McDonald's for killing you. In this case, they can freeze you out and you go, I'm going to sue them. I don't think you're going to win that case in court. So the government, so what I'm saying is that the market is being shielded by government protective measures here, which makes it complicated and frustrating because we can't actually have these. So what, you disagree? You think ERCOT's not being shielded by the government here?
Oh no, I disagree with the macro point. No, keep going. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, hold on. Which point did you make? Because maybe I was. I don't.
I'm struggling with this idea that well, number one, like I said before, I mean, I axiomatically disagree that if left to their own devices, I think the free market has proven a bajillion times over that they'll never spend those dollars. And if they do, they're just going to pass it on to the customer.
Let me ask you like this. Let me ask you like this. Okay. Let me put it like this. Who do you think big oil companies fear more? Private landowners, FERC, the Railroad Commission, you know, insert government body here. Who do they fear more?
One of the letters that you just mentioned.
And that's my case. So the that's the point, is that the big companies are not afraid of the retribution from the individuals. They're afraid of the government monopoly. So the government, so when they are constructing how they're operating, they are actually trying to prevent the government from cracking down on them far more than they are preventing me and you. If
right,
and this is a hypothetical.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So hypothetically speaking, if ERCOT, and this is not how it is, hypothetically, if this did not fall under the act of God, this was like, no, you clearly could have prepared for this and you didn't, then they would face millions of lawsuits from Texans across the country who had pipes burst, damages, people died. They face millions of dollars in lawsuits. So their insurance company would either have to tote the bill for that, they'd go bankrupt, or they would have done the preventative measures. They don't have to do that. They don't have to worry about the preventative measures because they get the government shielding. And that's the problem.
I don't think that's accurate. I mean, Griddy, for one, is at risk. I mean, they already got, they lost their license to be able to provide power to the state. They're under massive lawsuits. No, so I don't think that's right. I think
they lost their license from the state. Yeah, that's the point.
I'm missing the point then. I'm missing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, so this is not a true free market. That's all the point is. The point is that the government is entangled in this. And so when the government becomes entangled, you have, so I'm trying to think of another analogy. Okay, go back to the McDonald's analogy. The McDonald's analogy is pretty much.
But McDonald's analogy doesn't work because McDonald's, you have a pure apples to apples, so you can go down the street and get a Wendy's or a Burger King, whatever. In this dynamic, you're not talking about that. You're talking about,
why aren't you talking about that?
Why? Because what you're talking about in a macro. So in the McDonald's example, you're talking about, hey, I'm hungry, I want a burger, and I've got 17 different options. Mm-hmm. In the other example, you're talking about, hey, I need power to stay on at my house consistently. Mm-hmm. But yeah. you don't have any say on how that you don't have any say at current in 2021 on how the power actually physically gets delivered to your location. And so you have a choice. You have a binary choice of providers that are basically the same choice, but just packaged very differently because of like their pricing models. But like it's not as though you have true choice. You're just like, hey, who do I want to send my bill?
I'm going to solve this. I'm going to solve this. Okay, let's go build a power plant tomorrow, and let's just sell power to the market.
Yeah, we're arguing two different points because like I agree with you that the government is inextricably linked to the process, but that's not. I don't see how that's like. I guess I don't see how that's like.
Right. So, you could start a power company tomorrow, and we would winterize our product, and we would say that if you use our power, you go through Samuels and Ray. I'll give you first name. We're gonna winterize everything. No worries. Use us. We can't just do that.
Let me ask you this because like I said, I think I just missed it. What's the point you're trying to make? I'm over here. You're over here. What's the?
Yeah, the point is that usually the problems that are attributed to the free market, and there are problems in the market. The market's not perfect, so that's a given. A lot of times they are a result of how the government is allowing or forcing companies to work, and so then we get mad.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yes. I mean that. I didn't think that's what we were talking about. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So my point is right now, who can we and you have no say in what's going to happen in the ERCOT story, right?
Right.
They have no responsibility to me and you, and that's the problem. That's the whole problem. That's why McDonald's is different. That's why you keep saying McDonald's is different, because McDonald's is responsible to me and you. They are not, and because they are not, they don't have to deal with things. So McDonald's has all kinds of food measures in place to assure that they're not serving you. Well, okay, I don't want to get carried away with McDonald's serving, but the McDonald's governmental responsibility is fundamentally different than the power players in Texas.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about something completely different. No, I completely agree with everything you just said. That wasn't the point I was trying to make. I'm really confused now. I don't know.
Let's wrap it up. I don't know. I won the day. It feels like. It's okay. What was your point, Ben? Let's hear it.
Okay, Jody.
Wow.
Just saying.
Wow.
Well, I thought we were talking about a specific example of the winterization of the ERCOT system, and I didn't think we were talking about like the fact that the government is involved, because the government, like ERCOT, is the government. The point I was trying to make is what you're advocating for is if the government oversight did not exist, that the free market would be prepared for situations like this or would remedy them differently. And I do not believe that's the case. And that's the point I was trying to make.
Yes. Okay. Right. Yes. So yeah. I should have stopped when you said I was right. Like, I should have stopped there. That was we made too much progress.
That's like the Facebook exchange that you sent me, and this guy is trying to make some esoteric point, and you're like, "Oh, you're over here," and he's over here. He's like, "Yeah, I knew you couldn't say anything to that." It's like, well, I mean, yeah, but that's not what we were talking about. I mean,
right. So I didn't have the ticker going. Sorry, that's my apologies. I was a little slow on the trigger there. Okay, so let me make sure. Let me reset the debate. From my standpoint, the ERCOT issue at its core is because the power companies in Texas do not have a true responsibility to their customers. Insert power company. You disagree with that, and okay. Then we just disagree on that.
So let me ask you this. So like wiping away this example, because this is just kind of a blanket or just kind of open-ended question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, in what market dynamic, in what environment, in what sort of world. I don't mean that. I don't like. Yeah. Like paint me a dynamic where there has ever been a situation where any company at scale. So not like if you're a company and I'm your only customer, obviously like what I want matters, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about any company across the spectrum of time that has had a customer base at scale, has the customer base ever actually been able to control the decision making that happens? I mean, once you get to scale, like you're talking about the too big to fail, like what I'm getting at is the too big to fail thing. And so like in your example, so like tear away all the reasons why ERCOT is not beholden to its customers. or isn't ERCOT, or isn't the entity that would create the power infrastructure to manage Texas, isn't that entity just by definition too big to actually answer to you or care what you have to say? Because the micro no longer matters. They're not making decisions for the individual anymore. They're making decisions for the masses. And so whether right or wrong, nefarious or not, like whatever, whether the motives are in line, the individual no longer matters, I think, regardless of sort of oversight dynamic. Do you not agree with that?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So let's pick a good example here. Netflix a few years back, I remember they sent me an email and said, "Hey, we're going up from $9 to $10 or $9 to $12 or whatever it was." And at the time, Netflix was early on, and I was like, whatever. This is back when you get the DVD still in the mail, and so I just canceled. Boop, canceled. Now, a month or two goes by, and they send me an email like, "Hey, sorry, we screwed up. We want you back." Now, it wasn't because I canceled, obviously. It was because enough people canceled that they realized that the market would not bear their price. So they had to readjust their pricing based upon what the market was telling them. Right?
Right. Yep.
In this example, in the ERCOT example, we have enough people that could, through litigation, institute change in the system. However, those people do not have, to my knowledge, the ability to litigate against the people that it caused the damage to them because they are protected by the government. So in this case, you have enough people through the winter storm who could come together through a class action lawsuit or multiple class action lawsuits and say, you know what, we're screw these guys, we're going to sue them, and then get them to and make them pay damages and stuff. But that option's not there.
So here's it's interesting, and I think we're gonna go down this pathway for the podcast today because the other thing doesn't seem nearly as fun. I think the complication there is that while I agree with the concept there, what you're talking about is having a system that when there are issues, concerns, grievances, they're adjudicated through a legal proceeding. If you have a legal proceeding, you need sort of a standardized, hey, here's how everyone's going to act. If you have a standardized, hey, here's how everyone's going to act, you probably have a regulatory body that's going to create those and look over that. And so you're creating the system that you're fighting against, right? And so by definition, I think that if you are looking for resolution of friction within the market to happen by sort of a arbitrator or a third party, you are by definition talking about the system that we have. Now, I mean, obviously, the system that we have is sort of modeled that way. It doesn't work that way. But you're talking about a system of structure through which, again, you sort of lose the who are they beholden to, right?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, but the other important avenue I would advocate for, maybe you include this when you're thinking about it, is that right now I'd also advocate that in the true free market, Samuels and Ray Power could come out and announce, listen, we're going to start putting power on the grid at the end of 2021, and we're going to winterize everything that we do. We can't do that. The process to do all that is we looked at those storage deals, those refinery deals. You look at those things; they're not easy to do. There's a bunch of paperwork, a bunch of studies. I don't know how fast you can get one up if you know all that, but it seems to be quite a process. We couldn't do that probably by the end of 2020. Maybe we could. I don't know, but it seems unlikely. So for us to look at the market and say, oh my gosh, all these other morons, they didn't winterize their stuff. We're going to winterize our stuff, and we're going to pick up all this client base because we're going to do that. We can't even do that. So we can't. So even if we said it's 100% market failure on the power companies, if I just concede that point, the problem is that the market does not allow us to capitalize on that because of the way it's structured.
I guess I'm just confused. Okay, so you in a past life actually used to work and do you had a career at some point and there was things that you did on a daily basis.
Website up?
No, it's okay. Don't let the facts. But
no, your website that you created.
That's for another time, not today. And I can either confirm or deny involvement or any sort of I don't know what you're talking about.
I can deny involvement easily, so I don't know. So go ahead, sorry.
I lost my train of thought. Now you got me thinking about that thing.
I'm sorry. You were going some propaganda. Go ahead. In my past life, I used to work.
Oh yeah, I mean, and so I forget. I guess actually I do forget where I was going, but I mean I was going to talk about the fact that you had customers and Let me say it this way: if you had customers and you had a major expense and you had to buy an office, let's say the company was expanding and you needed to buy more infrastructure, you need to buy an office to put the people in, etc. I'm of the opinion that as a business owner, that's an expense that you are taking. You should be taking on. Now, obviously, you have bank equity, you have your credit, you have a lot of different avenues to make it cheaper for yourself. But what you don't have is, hey, customer X, who I have an MSA with, hey, I want to buy a new building, write me a check for $1 million, please. And so with ERCOT, with this system, what I'm saying to you, and I'm not necessarily telling you that I'm right, but what I'm telling you is that I believe very strongly, but I believe that let's use the math. Let's say, make the math easy. Let's say that winterizing the system, I forget what the numbers were, winterizing the system for all of Texas was going to cost $100 billion. Okay. And out of that $100 billion pie, let's say in this example, Griddy owns 1%. Mm-hmm. I'm of the opinion that Griddy should pay 1% of $1 billion to that check, because that's the requisite percentage of the market that they supply. Full stop. I'm not saying that I think Griddy should pack that into their bill. I don't think they should raise the rates to their customers because of that. I think that as a provider to the power of that sector, the business owes that money. And so that's not regulatory oversight. That's not getting it from the government. That's not a grant. That's not a pass through to the customer. That's not a tax. That is the business paying their requisite share. And what's that?
It's a tax on Griddy.
But it's not, because it's not a tax, because it's not being forced by anyone. It is their requisite cost of the infrastructure needed. Because in your example, this free market, like the free market. So let's say in this $100 billion example, if it is a true free market, are you of the opinion that in this example, then Griddy, like if they just didn't want to pay, they would still be able to utilize the system, but someone else would foot their bill? I mean, isn't that the definition of socialism? Like, isn't it like?
Well, why do they have to winterize? You're mandating it, which makes it a tax. That's my point.
But so going back to my original point, it seems prudent, it seems logical, and it seems.
I'm big on disclosure. Let me clarify. I'm big on disclosure, and not 75 pages of disclosure, but so if Griddy, if you're going to stop with Griddy, and Griddy said, and again, this gets back to the liability. If Griddy said to you, we expect to have it except for these three circumstances, tornadoes, hurricanes, and freezing ice where limbs block down, and earthquakes. I don't know, 4 things. Okay. And that's the disclosure they give you when you sign up. And then they shut the power off when this happens. That does not fall in the purview of what they told us. The problem, and so in your example about what I mean, right? Agreed?
Well, no, you just walk yourself into. You walk yourself into, I think, a much more slippery slope than we even have now, because companies literally would not care. They just hey, look at the people. I mean, talk to someone that has a litany of pre-existing conditions at healthcare and see how difficult it is for them to get coverage. I mean, it's that sort of thing, like you're talking about. So what would happen is the Griddys of the world would say, hey, if everything's perfect, we'll get power. If these 912 things happen in any combination, like you may or may not, do you want to sign up? And then everyone adopts the same thing. And now across the entire,
would not adopt the same thing. That's the
of
whole
course
point.
they would. Of course they would.
No, they would.
If you look at the litigation history of our country, anytime that a company has done something, the market has reacted down to it. The standards get lower; they don't get higher. And so, if there were a number of disclosures, every company would just move the needle back down.
So you don't think the streaming market is raising its bar continually?
I'm sorry?
You don't think the streaming market is raising the bar continually?
But I don't think it's the same dynamic. I mean, it's not like you have one streaming service.
It's not, because the government's not involved. That's the whole point. All the things that the principle here is that when you look at so if you're going to say that Griddy would do something bad if there was no regulation, I don't care. First off, this is Don't Let the Facts. I'm not picking on Griddy. This is a comedy show. But okay, so we're just using names here. I don't. Maybe they would. Maybe they do something terrible. But on the flip side, someone would come in. I'll give you an example. So where I used to live back in Louisiana, there was this plumbing company, and they charged significantly more for plumbing work, right? But they drug tested all their employees, and they did all this other stuff. But they charged 20, 30, 40% more for the plumbing work. They stayed slam full, right? if you called them up, and I don't know what playing work costs, but let's say it's 150 an hour, and for them, and a normal guy's 100. I don't know, 130, whatever. If you call them up, they're going to charge you more because they're drug testing. What? See,
because you're talking about
market.
You're talking about things that are luxuries and sort of like they don't matter. Like, I'm talking about
plumbing matters. Plumbing matters.
No, but you're talking about what was the other thing you said? You said like streaming services. I mean, like that, like to the baseline of like humanity, that doesn't matter. I would argue that power is a lot more important. I mean, like
exactly. So we should have the market competing, not the government messing it up. That's the whole point. When you let the market compete, it competes, and you have scumbags, and you have folks.
The power market in Texas axiomatically has to have a cohesive broadband network to it. It can't be, oh well, this company selects or like services these 11 people, and this company selects. I mean, like you have to have cohesion across the market because electricity doesn't because you have to have electricity go back and forth. Like we have electricity come on and tell you the trillion reasons why like I need power to go, like the city needs power to go from one side to the other, and like AC and DC currents. I mean, we could have that conversation, but like, are you making the argument that you think that power should be completely and utterly deregulated, and like if you can get power, cool. If you can't, great. Like if you go back to the Stone Ages because like your neighborhood doesn't have power, then that sucks for you and you should move. If you're in a I'm confused here. What?
I love the free market. I love the free market. Like so, I mean, the problem.
It's really easy for one of the two of us to say. What it's not as easy as someone to say is when you've got 4 kids and you're making just enough to keep the lights on as is. I mean, like what we're talking about is wealth inequality, because like the nonchalance that you're talking about, the nonchalance that you're talking about this with sort of is indicative of like everybody's got access to the same things, and like if you can't pay for the thing, then that sucks for you. It is
no. The problem is that again we attribute the faults of free market that are rightly put on the government, and then we say, hey, the free market's messed up. It's like no. The government is screwing all this up. Quit blaming the market. And so that's the problem. And so you say, well, there's all the inequality issues, and they're there. Most of them are called by the government. Next.
It's amazing to me. I mean, you're not the first. You certainly won't be the last to that I'll hear say that. I mean, I just it's
the incredible. The war on drugs.
It's incredible. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking. It's incredible to me. It's incredible to me that people can look at the way that private industry works and say, yes, if we give those guys free reign to do whatever they want, we'll be in a better position than we are in now. And that's what you're saying. And I fundamentally disagree with that.
This might be checkmate. Just so we're clear, this is checkmate. The largest killer of human beings in history is the government, and it's so far outside of the realm of anything else that you cannot even come close to it. Mao himself has killed more than current populations of countries today. Stalin, Hitler. The government is responsible for more human death, more inequality, more pressure than anyone else in the world.
And Ryan, you know what? If private industry had the same access to wealth, power, greed, and human capital, I guarantee you the private industry would be exponentially worse off. Absolutely, no. I mean, it's because of the ubiquity of government. It's the only reason of what you just said. If the power structure was different, if there was no government but private industry ran the show, you don't think the private industry would take care of the problems the same way? You don't think that seriously? Really? I mean, come on. Look at what's happening in the labor market right now in China. I mean, you don't think
a private market. It's not a private market. There's nothing private about it.
But that's what I'm saying. If you leave it up to the market, you don't have free market. You get China. You don't get if left up to their own devices, private industry, you don't get an actual free market. You get the most nefarious and the voracious of the free market that they make the laws, and then you just have you have a China.
I'm okay. Hold on, I'm not following here. China is a communist country, so I'm not sure how you're attributing the free market problems to there. So, I mean, what am I missing here? There's a connection I'm missing.
No. I don't. But I don't mean politically. I mean just in the concept of if left to their own devices, private industry, you would have just like I said, you'd have a reshuffling of the private industry, and so at the top now, rather than a theoretically disinterested arbiter, you have a now you like axiomatically there's intent, there's nefarious intent, that the leaders at the top in this like free enterprise are incentivized to destroy the people down here, because as a free market there's only so much of the pie, and the guys up here obviously want all of it, and so like that you squash the little guy. Obviously, I'm not making the argument that now that's not the case, but what I'm saying is by removing the governmental, or I shouldn't even say governmental because it's regulatory, really. By relinquishing the regulatory oversight, it's no longer a question anymore. You're going to have that, as opposed to now there's like, you at least have a fighting chance. I think the free market, like in the times that we have seen free market play out, you have seen like what happened in the oil industry that got us Standard Oil and the huge conglomerates. You could look at that as an American success story of, oh my God, these guys put this together, this massive empire, and this is amazing. If you look at the story was frivolous lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit, just like, thumb down on the guy till they accrete the power. And so the government had to come in and play like, mega buster. I don't agree with the filibuster crap. I don't think you should do that. I don't think the way the government broke the company up is the right way to do that. But what I'm telling you is that if left to like free enterprise and free market, you get the monopolies. Like, so let me say it this way. In today's world, let's say that in a free market society, I believe that you would have a T-Mobile, AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, and whoever else merger. They'd all become one, and then they'd say, hey, this is the way it goes. You either sign on or you don't. That's up to you. If you want cell phone service, if you want internet, this is the price you pay. If you don't want to pay that, then there's no one to tell us that there's no right that you have to have it. There's no one to tell us that we can't charge it. So like, you don't get access to your information. And to you and I, we'll probably be able to pay whatever that number is. To a large percentage of this country, it won't be a question. They will not be able to afford it. Like, is that equitable? Is that okay? Do you, and I'm not saying, I don't think you support this, but I mean, like, would you support an environment where there's a certain sector of the market that is simply priced out of goods that should be accessible to anyone? And absent government intervention, have you seen a free market address of how to not have that happen? I mean, if you look at the all the stuff they're going on with the internet privacy stuff right now, that's what they're talking about, right? I mean, like, they're talking about privatizing the internet to a degree that there's going to be a large segment, like billions of people on the planet, that won't even be able to like pretend to be able to afford it. And I think that if left to free market, you get that. You get really expensive crap.
Yeah. So okay. So you said a lot there. Let me try to unpack this.
As usual.
Well, it was all eloquent and well sounded. You convinced me.
Doubtful.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page. So when you talk about the internet, let's just talk about this. Whether you're talking about someone in Kenya or Dallas Fort Worth, is it a right to have access to the internet? Are you arguing that's a right?
2 billion times yes. In this world, I believe that not having a equitable way to access the information on the internet is the way that you get dictatorships, etc. I mean, yes, I believe that access to the internet is a human right, because I think it's the same as no. And I'm saying you're disagree. I mean, maybe you do, but I believe that in today's world, having access to the internet is the exact same thing as having access to books in the 1500s. And if the people that didn't have access to books, they didn't have access to books because people wanted to keep them stupid. And so I look at the internet in the same ilk of today. Do you? What do you think?
So who's going to control it then?
Who's going to control
the internet? Because it's a right. That means someone's got to control it and defend it and protect it.
Why?
Because it's right. If it's a right, then you have to have government involved.
Okay. So you don't think that access to power is a right?
Do I think that access to power is a right?
Like power generation, not
Yeah.
power. Yeah. Do you think that me being able to walk over to my wall, flip the light switch, and as long as I've paid the bill, do you think that the light turning on, do you think that's a right? Or do you think that's a luxury?
I think it's a luxury. Otherwise, you would have to argue that we'd take every homeless person in the U.S. right now and put them in somewhere that has power, and around the world.
But I said because I'm paying for it. Like I'm paying for it. So therefore it's a right.
Market transaction. So that's why I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out the distinction there. Like you said, you're paying for it. So if you're paying for it, then it's a transaction. It's not a right. The internet was free because it's a right.
Well, you don't get anything in this world for free. I mean, so in that case, we don't have any rights. I mean, you don't even get to talk for free. I mean, well, actually, you do. You do a lot.
I guess I'm trying to understand when you're saying right. Okay, so like I have the right, or I should have the right. I don't actually have the right because of the way it works. I should have the right to purchase land and maintain it forever. I don't because of property taxes. But let's just presume they get rid of property taxes tomorrow. I have the right to own land. That's a right, right? So you need the government to protect it. So Ben Samuels can't come and forcibly remove me from my land. You need the government to protect me from Ben Samuels or whomever to come remove me from my land, right? So there is a time where you need the government to do something, and that's to enforce a right. So when you're saying that internet is a right, my question, I'm trying to understand what you mean, because in the power example, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think through it because. Are you saying?
So let me ask you this: play devil's advocate for me.
Yeah.
In what? Paint a scenario in which having the internet is a luxury that is okay for it to be a luxury. Like, paint me a scenario where you think it's okay that someone doesn't have access to the internet just because they can't afford it. So the person you're talking about, they can't afford it. They have zero money whatsoever. Give me a case why that person should not have access to the internet.
Yeah. So, okay. I would say, and off the top of my head here, because I didn't know we were going down the internet freedom rights today. Off the top of my head today, I would be perfectly content with a modified solution of the internet that's like this. One, you pay.
That's not the question.
Yeah, no, I have to answer it this way to answer it. A modified solution of the internet which says, I'm gonna pick up 4 price points here, but I don't know. $1,000 a month, and that means there's literally no one monitoring what you do. Like no one. Like the internet provider guarantees that the NSA and everyone, they're not watching what you do. So you're $1,000 a month for that. $100 a month is, minimal security. $10 a month is low level security and free. And so each time you go down the bunny hole, each time you go down the price, you get more ads, right? So at $1,000 a month, there's no ads. No one's monitoring you. You are incognito. If you're free, you're full of ads like we have now. That's the only reason the internet's free right now is because of ads. It's not really free. It's free because of ads. And so a lot of people don't realize that when they're taking the ads that the access to get online is free. Well, that's exactly why it's free.
Oh no, yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, okay. I was like, so I don't know what the price points are or how it would work out, but so in that, I think if talking about a free market, that would be a solution. It's okay. You want access to the internet here? Just got to deal with ads. Okay, so what? I don't have a problem with that. The market. That's the market. The market would want as many people on as possible. So therefore, it would say, how do we figure this out? In this case, they do ads, which is why YouTube runs ads. They want as many people as possible, so they run ads on their stuff. Netflix, they don't want as many people as possible, so they charge a premium. They could run ads, Netflix could, but they don't, because they want less people. If the internet model, that's what would happen. Me and you'd start a company, say, dude, we're gonna run ads. Here we go, and people access for free. Then you go. Mm-hmm. So I think that's how it works. So the market would fix the problem.
But at the baseline level, you didn't change anything, right? Like at the free option, it's just like it is today. Like you didn't actually change anything.
I just didn't make it a right. I just said the market would solve the problem.
But would they? What if the cheapest level of internet is $20 a month?
Me and you would start a company that would say, we're going to give you internet access, but you have to do with ads. The barrier of entry, as long as the barrier of entry isn't being impeded by the government, someone will try to compete for market share. And so in this case, you have market share people who are not accessing it. And in this analogy we're making up here, you have $20 a month to get in. And we're like, okay, well, what about everyone under $20 a month? Let's do a 2-tier company, $10 a month for half the ads, $0 for all the ads, and boom, let's roll it out. As long as the government doesn't prevent us from a barrier of entry to getting in, it's a very viable market that we try to tap. Why wouldn't we? We as entrepreneurs, that would be a great thing to get in on. So we would love if there's no governmental barrier of entry, I would love for them to do $20 a month. And if I had the money to start this, because I would tap in all the people who didn't want to pay for it. The market creates opportunities. It creates missed opportunities. And so we look at, so as an entrepreneur, what you look at the market is where are there deficits or where can you compete at? Can you offer better service for more cost, less cost, all these things?
Wait, hold on. So if in the free version, there's a ton of ads and private company is going to come in and charge me $20 a month to have a slightly better service with even more ads, like that doesn't seem equitable.
No, less ads.
But why am I paying money to have?
You don't have to. You don't have to. It's up to you. You get to choose. That's how the market works. You might say, "Oh my God, these ads are outrageous."
But you're talking about it's as though there's a binary choice of okay, it's assumed that I have the dollars. Now I get to decide whether I want to spend the dollars or not. What I'm telling you,
it doesn't matter. You get the free option with the ads. It doesn't matter. That's my point. That's the whole point. If you don't have the money, it doesn't matter. You just go on the free market, free version. Right?
I understand the conception of what you're talking about, but I think what you would get through that would be, the bandwidth speeds of the people at the bottom would be like literally like you get to download a megapixel an hour. The email would take 6 hours to download.
That's how it is already on some level. I pay for internet. I pay a lot for internet. I don't imagine everyone has my kind of speed, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, I do too.
So we're paying more for more speed already than other people.
But I'm not talking about like the people I'm talking about. Like the only access that they currently have is at the library because it's free. I'm not talking about someone that I'm not talking about the person that is acquiring it through whatever Comcast. Like I'm talking about the person that currently the only way that they have access to the internet is through the library. If that person gets cut off from that ability to do that, like which is what you're talking about.
Well, okay. So we're talking about someone who can only access it through.
I'm talking about I'm talking about the people that have no money. You're talking like yeah. There's a larger percentage of this country that I don't think people want to talk about. That I'm not saying you don't, but I'm like in general that just don't have money. There seems to be this idea that like everyone like has the money. Oh, like if you want to spend it, it's there. Like there's a lot of people.
No, I gave you an option. I just gave you an option that you don't have to have any money. You show up to the library and you have internet.
But what if the free market doesn't have a free option? What if the cheapest option is $10 a month?
Okay, so let's just take this out. So let's say this is what you're saying. Tomorrow there's a new law and it changes how the barrier of entry to manage the internet is, right? Internet companies. So instead of AT&T, Spectrum, and however many so anyone can start an internet company. You're proposing that no one would figure out a way to sell to those who cannot pay for it. And I submit to you that I don't buy that because we already do that. So why would we not do that?
But my point is that service provider now has the ability to moderate content, modulate speeds. They have. I mean, they are now in control of the content stream. Whereas if it actually is a free market, then there's not someone buffering where I am like. In my opinion, and maybe this is a fundamental difference. Like when I hear free market, my like there's a more direct relationship between consumer and provider there, where like in this dynamic, in the dynamic you're describing, I don't think it's any different than what we currently have. It's like it's the exact same thing. We currently have what you're describing.
I know. So.
I mean, there are services that you can pay for, like you can pay more, like on Tor and some other websites or some other servers that don't have, that you do have access to some more of the privacy stuff. And now we get to really look at the talking head, like actually for real.
Right. So, this is, I guess, the confusing part for me is that we have the ability for people to go get the internet for free. And someone's paying for that. The library is paying for that. It's not free for those people that show up at the library to view it. The library is subsidizing their cost for the internet. Now, maybe the government gives it to them for free. I have no idea, but it's not even free then. Someone's paying for it. So someone's always paying for something. So all you're suggesting is that, and this is what I'm confused about. So in this model, the library could pay for a subscription, which is what they already do, or they could use the free version. I don't know how the library pays for the internet. I don't know. I guess it's subsidized to the government. I really have no idea. Maybe they get it for free. I have no idea. But if the library in your model is getting it for free now, and then they had to pay for it, that would be the distinct difference. And I have no idea if they do or not. But I can tell you right now, I would be interested in offering the library a service, because they're going to bring in where I would buy them computers. I'd go set them up. I would encourage them to have everyone in there and use my internet service. And I'm going to give them a little bit of a cooker so that everyone comes in and runs those ads, because I'm going to make $1 gazillion off people using the internet at the library. Why wouldn't I do that? That's an opportunity to capitalize. These people can't get anywhere else. I'm going to go put nice computers in the library, and I'm going to give them a decent speed, and then go there and just stream all day long, and I'm winning. It makes me money.
Maybe I'm way too pessimistic about this, and maybe I'm looking at it about the wrong way. But let me say it to you this way:
you love me.
Well, obviously, throughout time and throughout the time and space continuum, we have had governments from all spectrum of across the aisle, and routinely throughout all of those civilizations, there's always a subsect of the culture and of the society that has not is in the dumps, etc. I mean, like the destitute, like like we've always had the governmental backstop, but you've also always had barons of industry, and I guess I just fail to buy into the theory that, while you and I obviously very much agree that government intervention is not the path forward, like hardly ever, and we very much agree that governments have misaligned incentives with the populace, I guess I'm just fighting against the narrative that private industry is any more aligned in their desires when compared to the populace. Like, aren't you just transferring wealth and power to a different power elite? Like, is
so the part of the thing that you're pushing back, I think, is that you're pushing back, and this is hard to visualize here because all the things you said are right. Part of what we push back on is what we see from big business, and big business is aligned to make government happy. So they're overly incentivized to make sure that they get government happy. And so we go, well, their interests don't align with ours. Why would they in this new situation? It's like, well, they're not, because they're aligned with the governments. And so that's the problem. That is the fundamental problem, is that they are aligned with the government's interest today. And so, well, if you remove the government, well, then they have to be aligned somewhere else. And to your point, maybe they become nefarious, maybe they become toxic, maybe they become worse than what they are today. They're bad today. And this is the problem, is I'm not defending the big corporations. I think that they are in bed with the government and do terrible things. The problem is that those two things go hand in hand. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, 53 minutes in, maybe I had an epiphany. I mean, like, I guess the way I've been looking at this for literally the last 53 minutes was sort of just through the prism of some tangent. It's like some tangent in reality. And what I mean by that is that, like, if you're painting a scenario where we're just kind of playing a purely theoretical exercise where there is no construct whatsoever other than people that are living their lives and companies doing their thing, and there's like no other oversight whatsoever, and it's like that's it, then yeah, like, yes, you would have such a fundamentally different dynamic that, like, I don't think either you or I can even postulate it, like what that would look like. I guess what I'm saying is that in any sort of realm of feasible possibility in anywhere in the near future, you're going to have some level of oversight from somewhere, and so like that. So
yes. So here's the problem. Here's the crux of the issue. I'm saying this is how we solve the problem, and your response is, well, that doesn't work because this, and this. And I'm like, well, right, because the problem is the construct we're operating of. And then to that you say, 53 minutes in. Sorry, I should have been clear sooner. You say, hey, well, this is never going to happen. I'm like, okay, well, if I concede to you that's never going to happen, then you just need to concede that's never going to get much better. And if you want to concede that, then we should stop talking about it. The problem is that, so let's take the war on drugs. Let's take the war on drugs for half a second. Just listen to me having war on drugs. Tomorrow, the U.S. should legalize every drug. There should be no prohibition on drugs, period. It should be done. That's my position. Now, practically speaking, that's not going to happen. They're not going to legalize heroin or anything. Like, this is not going to happen. And if they even called me and asked me how to do it, I would not advise them to do it overnight because the sudden shock to the system is so fundamental. However, the goal has to be, from my perspective, that's the society that we need to work towards. So the argument is based in this is so if you said, well, if you legalize this, well, you'd still have these problems. Right. Now, okay. So, okay. How do you fix that problem? Well, we decriminalize or legalize, however you want to phrase it, that. And so when you're talking about these issues, the issue is each time we get to we hit a wall, it's the problem is that the government's interests are aligned with big business, and big business interests align with the government. So the more that we remove, the better chance me and you and these disenfranchised people who don't have the ability to speak out, the more chance that they have. The longer we keep these two people, these two groups aligned, the less chance they have. And so the only way to actually get the progress that we want is to realize that it's a long road to hoe. And so we have to take steps to deregulate and to get these two people, their interests unaligned as quickly as possible, which is why I keep going back to on the ERCOT thing. Are they liable to me and you? And if they're not liable to me and you, we're never going to fix the issue. They may winterize it and we may miss the next storm, but something else will happen. And then we'll say, oh, well, and so we just compound the problem over a longer period of time. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, no, I think that no, you made some good points. So, okay, so taking this to a different example, or looking at this from a different prism, are you telling me that you think that the 2008 housing collapse is
exactly
mostly
described?
Are you telling me that you think it is mostly attributable to government intervention and government policy and the bank reaction to those things, or are you telling me that the banks and the government were playing the same game? They both know what was going to happen, and just like the banks and the government are playing the same game, and the little guys on the other side.
So you're more well versed in this on the details than I am. I will tell you what I generally think, and you tell me where you disagree. I generally think that the government overly incentivized banks to give out loans that were irresponsible, and the government promised that they were going to back them and subsidize them and all this stuff. And so the bank was incentivized to not really do credit checks and all this stuff. And so therefore the bank, instead of having caution at the forefront of these high dollar loans, they threw caution to the wind because they could sell off their loans. So is it chicken? Is it egg? I don't know who comes first. I know during the Bush administration, he was really pushing people buying houses. And then shortly thereafter, we had the housing collapse. So I think they're both at fault. I don't know if I have a, go ahead. I'll let you, maybe you want to nuance a little differently because you're a little bit more versed in the details than I am.
No, I think I think that's fair. I think where I was going with that is that, okay, so in this dynamic, obviously they're both culpable, but I mean, you had banks, make the math really easy. You had banks giving out $1 million homes to people that shouldn't have even been able to afford a $200,000 home. Right. And the reason for that can be, hey, the government said, hey, there's a backstop here, just run roughshod, go do your thing. I don't really buy that. What actually happened in practice was the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the mortgage security companies were packaging up all these massively these horribly shorted mortgages into these securities that made it into the private sector, or I guess the public sector in the stock market, but I mean the private sector, and then they were traded. They're traded so many times, and there was so much inflation that happened through that process that then collapsed. Now, going to your point, is that sort of mechanism, is that indicative of governmental policy sort of being this balloon of, hey, you can do this thing and we'll catch it on the backside? I don't really know, because there was a while there where it wasn't entirely clear how the levers were going to be pulled to extricate Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and how they were going to solve this. And so maybe the thesis of, hey, these guys built this $1 trillion+ hole on purpose, quote unquote, and knew it was going to happen, and they wanted to burn the system down. And Alan Greenspan was going roughshod, and that was it was all coordinated, and everyone sort of saw this happening. Or you can make the argument that the private sector took this opportunity of arbitrage and was like, oh wait, hold on, we can give someone $1 million for a home that we know they can't afford, they're going to default on. Then we can sell that thing at a profit, and then not only that, we can trade on that profit multiple times and not get caught, and then someone else get less holding the bag. Are you sign me up for that? Are you kidding me? Absolutely. And in that second example, I don't think that that's government driven. I think that is purely profit and private motivated or like private industry driven. And like, so I, to your point, I think you make both sides, but like, I mean, yeah.
So let me ask you a couple things. Aren't those bonds that they packaging up and selling, aren't they by law to be required by reviewed by people who examine the credit rating of those things?
They are now. Didn't used to be that way.
Prior to that,
yeah, that was one of the things that changed in 2008, but it didn't used to be that way. That was part of Dodd-Frank, if I remember right.
I think they were checked. Okay, we'll put this aside for now. So when they're packaging these loans, who are they selling them to?
They're selling them to the market. I mean, they're selling them to ETFs. They're selling them to REITs. They're selling them to private mortgage-backed security companies. Like there was an entire cottage industry that like this is all the firm does. We buy these securities. I mean, like, and then they'd also sell them to market. I mean, they'd sell them as treasury bonds. I mean, T-bills. I mean, whatever.
Right. So let's just say again, you're more versed in the details. That's not my understanding, but I'll concede for now. So all I would say is that let's just say that everything you say is 100% true because you're definitely more than we listen. Huh?
I said that's doubtful.
Well, I mean, I didn't even listen. I didn't even pop it up. Okay, I was trying to be nice. Then the result is quite clear that the banks should go under.
Yes.
Should be held liable for multiple lawsuits.
Yes.
Okay, and so that would fundamentally be the biggest deterrent in the world to prevent that from happening again.
But so here's the problem with that, and I don't know where you fall on this because while I don't disagree, and take a second before you respond because I know like the libertarian side of your brain is going to go on fire when I say this.
It's already on fire. That's why the camera got too hot.
Believe me. Actually, maybe that's why. Maybe when you and I talk, you get so heated that the camera just like takes the heat. But here, okay, so. Hold on, I lost exactly what I was going to say. Hold on, let me try to get it back.
Libertarian side of my brain.
Yeah, hold on.
Housing crisis.
Yeah.
Banks being defaulted on, sued.
Yeah, every time you talk, I lose it more. Just keep going. It'll come back. Keep going. It'll come back.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that the Bush argument that's too big to fail is so let's just take that for a second. Let's just say that it's 100% free market problem. Let's just assume that it is. It's not, but let's assume that it is. I don't know what percentage on it. The government's involved somewhere, but let's just say it's 100% free market problem. Then you have Bush coming out and will say they're too big to fail. Now it's no longer a free market problem. And so now you have the government then saving these corporate. Go ahead. Are you get your point? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that drives my memory. So I mean, what I was going to say is, what you're describing is okay. So the free market, the way that we solve this is, you know what, guys, and let me finish this because I believe some part of what I'm about to say. But you know what, guys, if you were the one that got the $1 million loan and you knew that you couldn't afford more than $250,000 home, that's on you. And you know what, the fact that you and your kids and your family's on the street, that's on you. And you know what, the fact that you're going to be hungry and you probably won't ever be able to afford a home, maybe even get a job again because of your credit, that's on you. And you know what, that's the downside of the American dream, and it is what it is. Now, while I think there's some truth to that narrative of like, hey, listen, if you sign on to $1 million mortgage knowing you can't pay for it, you sort of deserve what's coming. That being said, I think that is taking advantage of the sort of financial illiteracy of a portion of the market, because when they're told by the experts that like, yeah, this is the home for you, and like I believe that there is some sort of culpability to the people in this dynamic in the banker's seat of like, hey, like, are you sure you can afford that? Rather than, hey, let's get you the most expensive house you can. And so what you're painting, here's where I'm going. What you're painting is the correction to the housing market in a free market is tens of millions of people literally homeless. You're talking about probably 1 million plus people literally dying of starvation, etc. You're talking about like an apocalyptic fallout in support of, hey, listen, like there's no government enterprise to save you. You fucked up here. Sorry, am I allowed to say it on here? Sure. You messed up here. It is what it is. Sorry, try again. But like in the process of doing that, you're killing millions of people. Now, like again, I think it's a delicate issue because the other side of that coin is okay. Well, you clearly can't have government protecting people from their own insanity, and etc. I mean, that's not what I'm advocating for. But like, do you see the demarcation there?
Yeah.
So how would you sort of address that in this dynamic? I don't think that you would disagree that if you let the housing market just crash on its own, you're killing people in mass. And like, is that okay in deference to like the fact that, hey, we're in a free market?
Then let me ask you this, just before I answer, what would be different than what happened in 2008, your perspective? Like, so what happened? And then, because I hear the picture you're painting. So what was the reality in 2008?
I mean,
people lost their homes. I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm following you.
Yeah, I mean, well, the short answer is that I guess my thesis is that it would be exponentially worse. I mean, because you also had like California for a time after that. They put they did the same thing they're doing now. They put a moratorium on evictions and all. I mean, there were like other governmental stopgaps that if they weren't there, the carnage would have been exponentially worse. And also, sorry. The other last thing I was saying is, and also you had everybody across the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, and private industry incentivized to make this problem go away. And so you had a lot of reverse engineering and cash infusion that, again, if left to the private industry, I would tell you wouldn't happen.
Okay, so let me just hit you with this. Tell me I hit you. So let's say that your boy JP Diamond, or whatever his name is, Jamie Dimon. Let's say your boy Jamie Dimon gets hold of the bag of $1 billion worth of bad loans. Okay. In a normal situation, what would happen, to make sure I'm right here, is he'd have to go to bankruptcy and restructure that, or he'd have to sell the debt to someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If tell me if I'm crazy here, but it would be possible for in the free market to say Samuels and Ray come in and buy the loans for $500 million, 50 cents on the dollar, and then call up all its homeowners and say, hey, guess what? We've all bought your debt, and so you can stay and pay cheaper. That's a possible free market solution, right? And why wouldn't? And that's how debt works now, as it is.
I was going to say, I mean, yeah, that's a possible scenario today.
Yeah, well, I'm saying,
I think it would be less likely. Honestly, I think it would be less likely in a free market example. But yeah, yes,
I would be less likely just because I'm not sure. It's like when
I think this goes back to, maybe this is just sort of like what we're talking about is almost like the altruism of humanity. But I don't believe that if given an opportunity,
but me and you would. That's the thing.
But
me and you would. And so as long as the barrier of entry is low and it's not being restricted by the government, people will try to make money and do good things.
But wouldn't you and I, in that dynamic, wouldn't you and I be just absolutely trounced by the big guy because they don't want us there because we're actually doing good? And aren't they given no governmental oversight, aren't they incentivized to just absolutely destroy us?
Well, okay, yeah. So, okay, you and I, obviously, I'm using people like you and I. There's obviously some billionaires that are good folk, right? So, listen, let's take someone I don't like Mark Cuban. It would not surprise me at all if Mark Cuban bought a bunch of loans, 25 cents on the dollar, and then next thing you know, he's given 25% reduction or 50% reduction in houses because he makes money. He's giving 50% reduction in notes across the board, and next thing you know, this dude has made doubled his money, and he's got a huge celebrity, and people call him a good Samaritan. And so I don't know. To me, that's a very viable solution.
Let's talk about a different example, actually, because the housing market the housing one is difficult for a lot.
It is difficult. Yes.
So let's talk about a different one because I think it's a really interesting conversation, and I think this is a better example. So I think they got a bailout also in 2008, but they definitely got one this past year. Let's look at the cruise line industry for a second, okay?
Oh,
cruise line industry is.
You like being.
What's that? What is that?
Hands on my face now.
But so and maybe it's not a good example, but the reason I think about it is because, okay, listen. So if you're going on a cruise, you're going on vacation. If you're going on vacation, that automatically means that you have excess revenue, you have disposable income, like by definition.
Yes.
Unless you're getting sent to on it by a company, but like by definition, if you're sitting on a cruise ship, you have extra money to be sitting there.
Or you're racking up credit card debt.
Or yes, the American dream, absolutely. But you have an election to either do that or not. Like there's very few people these days that are taking the trip from Miami to Madrid because that's the only way they can get across the
I agree. It's a free choice to make, regardless how they're spending for the money. Yes, I agree.
Right. But still, they came out with their hands out. It's like, hey, we want to be part of this billions of dollars package. Now, I think it was a couple 3 weeks ago, you heard me rail against the airline industry. I think they're the same way. I think you should absolutely let them burn to the ground. To your point, I think that the airline industry and the cruise industries are two industries that I would fully support. Sort of like this more free market dynamic of, listen, if you can't pay your own bills. And you have been propped up by the government so much as it is. That's a whole different conversation. But like, if you can't subsidize yourself, if you can't figure this out yourself, like, you don't deserve to be there. And to your point, if United and Delta and American and every single airline were to go under tomorrow, like, somebody would start a new one, Gates or Buffett or somebody. I mean, like, there'd be new planes in the sky the next day. It's not like that debt. Those planes wouldn't get reacquired. And so,
Richard Branson, too soon.
Oh, Jesus. But no. But I think that when you talk about housing, you're sort of like you're encroaching on a bunch of different things. When you talk about the other things, like, if left to the free market, I think that those industries, I mean, would they even? I shouldn't say they wouldn't exist, but I mean, they would certainly be
different.
Wildly different.
The cruise is great. I'm glad you brought it up. The cruise line went begging to Carlisle or BlackRock or whoever it was for money, and they're like,
all of them.
Okay, here we go. It's going to cost you your firstborn child and his firstborn child and the next 6 firstborn children. But guess what? Here we go. And instead of that happening, what happened was the government come in and said, "Oh, here's a check, ching," and then next thing you know, they get a bailout. So the free market was willing to come in and to subsidize them, not subsidize them in the way that the government does, but give them a loan that was require a lot of risk for the PE group. Let's be honest, because who knows when the cruise ships could go and all that stuff. And that's a risk I applauded because it was predatory in the sense of the terms were very aggressive. But listen, you might lose all of this money on this deal. Let the market take that risk.
So it's actually, so maybe we should have started here because I completely agree. I think my pushback is, I love that example, and I think you're right when talking about cruises. When talking about like home power or internet access or a home dwelling, I think the conversation needs to be different. And so left to their own devices, I think the same sort of levers would be pulled in like the home industry. Oh, well, we're allowed to raise, rental rates in this area 600% and people will still pay it. Okay, cool. Like, we're allowed to do this over here because people, like, we can get away with it because people will still pay it. Okay, cool. Like, you walk into a scenario where it very much becomes like, yeah, you have freedom of choice, but what if you can't afford, or what if like none of the choices actually work for you? And I think that's what you get in like the housing market. Whereas like a cruise, like, so said another way, let's say that from now on, from 2022 on, the minimum dollar amount to go on a cruise was $75,000. Okay, like, okay, that's tough, and there's only a very small fraction of people that are going to still take one. But like, that's a private industry choice. That if the cruise lines want to do that, okay. If you make it so that like across the country, the minimum the minimum rent you'll ever pay for a home is $5,000, but wages don't change. Like, you can't do that. And I'm not saying that would happen, but like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Berlin tried that. It turned out terrible for them. I mean, it just happened.
Too soon.
I didn't know you want to go to Berlin, but they just tried rent controls, and it turned out terrible for them.
Well, no, but wait. I don't know. I missed the rent control point, but I mean, but do you see what I'm saying?
Aren't you?
Right. Well, I was talking about the inverse. Yeah.
Inverse, but yeah, rent controls.
I'd much rather a rent control than a rent floor. I mean, the rent control actually doesn't sound too bad.
So, I think, and again, I keep pounding this home, the barrier to entry is usually the key to a lot of these problems. So if someone, to your point, who is getting screwed over, take the airlines right now, right? So if you do not wear a mask, if you didn't wear a mask on a plane, they could ban you for life, despite the fact they're taking your tax dollars. Now let's put the mask issue aside for a second. It's weird that they can ban you for life for some policy that probably be lifted up here in a few months or a year or two, or by the time we're grandkids.
That's a bold prediction, sir.
Okay, but the problem is, if there were enough people banned by mass, I don't know how many people have been banned, but if there were enough that it's so high for a barrier of entry, not from a cost of the plane standpoint, for all the other stuff that's involved, to service the non-mass crowd. So you're forced to go by the rules and deal with it. Whereas if you wanted to have a plane full of non-maskers, where you think about those people, then you can't even service that market. So the barrier of entry prevents people from having that market, and that's the problem. And so the barrier of entry sometimes is natural. So like in the airline industry, it's expensive to have a plane, so that's just a natural barrier to entry that you can't fix. But then all the other FAA regulations and guidelines, all those other things become additional barriers to entry, which limit the amount of people who can compete in the marketplace.
Can I start an airline with just like one plane? How many planes do you need to be able to have an airline?
I mean, if you had one plane, I would call it an airline. Can we split a plane?
I mean, can you like cut a plane in half? I mean, yeah, sure. Just take a while.
Did I ever tell you the story about me wanting to buy a plane?
No.
So, in our neighborhood, they have those little airports. You think you drove past when you came in. Okay. So twice a year, they do they do it last year. I don't know why. But anyways, twice a year, they'll do this thing where they take the kids up and fly them around. We took Drew. Yeah. So we take the kids every year and they get to go. Drew's only been old enough to go, I think. No, Kate went 1 year. Anyways. And Drew didn't get to go. And so for some reason, so they said, come back later. They canceled it. So he went back later. I think that's what it was. Anyways, it's at this guy's house because they all have their planes and their hangars at their houses. And so it's weird. 150 planes, 101 hangars. Anyways, and so the guy's talking about his plane. I'm like, oh, this is a nice plane. I said, do you mind me asking how much this plane costs? And he goes, $22,000. And I said, okay, $22,000. I said, I can afford that plane. Maybe I'll get that plane. He stops. He looks at me. He goes, son, this plane only holds 320 pounds with luggage, passenger, and fuel.
It's going to be a short trip, Ryan. It's going to be a short trip.
I appreciated that he called me fat in the most nice way possible. like didn't is this a beat? Like, son, no sir. You won't get off the ground, Bubba. You can take a bag of Cheetos with you.
You need about three of these planes.
I said, okay, what's the next size up? He said, a so-and-so. What's it cost? $78,000. I said, okay, I'm out. So there was my interest in plane buying, and it did that very quickly. So
for anybody that was paying attention in 2020, there was to your point, Ryan, the government decided to incentivize. I'm not actually entirely sure. I never got the story as to why. I guess I didn't really look into it, but the government wanted to incentivize the sale of private jets, and so for I think it was the third and fourth quarter of 2020. If you bought a private jet, you had to pay for it in full. But if you bought a private jet, and it could have been like one of these $25,000 ones, and you like flew a certain amount of hours on it or whatever, you could write off the entirety of the entire plane in 2020. And I know some people that out here in Midland that took advantage of that. But
how long until it's a carbon tax for having a private jet? A tremendous one, not an insignificant one.
Except what?
Except for Bill Gates.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my answer to that is probably I think that would be like a second term Biden or whoever is in office for the Biden complex at the time. If they somehow win the second term, I think that's a second term move. I don't think that's a first term move. That'd be an aggressive first term move.
I guarantee you, if they do it, it would be like the Cessnas, not the Lears, because then they couldn't fly around.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, you have to make sure that the government's still able to, burn their fuel. I mean, let's not pretend that they're going to be following the rules.
Yeah, because Bill Gates can't get on Zoom and do Davos. He has to fly there, obviously.
Clearly,
people don't know who he is. He's got such a small following.
Well, no, but I mean, hey, man, sometimes you just got to get the jet out. You know how they tell you you don't want to have the car to sit and idle for a long time. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to get the jet out and just kind of fly it around a little bit, And if you happen to land in Davos, the 1 week you're talking about climate change, who cares? What does that matter? Yeah. If you talk about in your book that it's going to take something of the magnitude of $6 trillion to retrofit the grid in our country, and that we should start tearing down oil and gas today in 2021, who cares? Who cares?
We're going to do a full review of that book one week. Not next week. I got to finish it, but next couple weeks.
Are you actually reading it? Like, have you finished it yet? Or
no. I got to finish the book. I probably won't finish it by next week, so maybe 2 weeks.
Right. All right. Well, Ryan, but before we sign off here, hey man, you let me go long today. Jesus,
I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah. Well, don't let the fact. Can we roll that real quick? But also, Ryan, happy International Women's Day. I know that's an important day in your life, so want to make sure that you're celebrating, to the fullest extent possible.
Why do you get me in trouble? I do a good enough job myself. I don't need you. Ben is good. Well, what next? Be back next week. Maybe an emergency one. Yes, this show, just so we're clear, disclaimer here, this show is for entertainment purposes only. It's not financial advice. Please consult a lawyer, CPA, or a communist for any other advice that you need when making decisions based upon the comedy hour that you just heard. Ryan Ray and Ben Samuels are fictional characters and do not represent anyone in real life for anything they say or have said, will said, think, or possibly could think.
If you get a chance, please go to RyanRayTalkingHead.com.
The TalkingHead.com.
Ryan.
All right. Be back next week unless Ben wants to have an emergency one next week. Oh, and hey, are we going to do that new podcast? Should we start teasing that? When's that happening? I've been reading like they're going to stop.
Oh, yeah. Can't do it yet.
And he's out. He is out. Just like that. Wow. All right. That's me. Music. Peace out.